Hello and welcome to the Fireplace Podcast. This is episode 21, in which we have a guest, Man Tai, who has reached fire and he helps others via counselling, and we're going to see how this has changed his attitude to early retirement. So welcome, Man Tai.
Good morning.
And we've also got Mike as usual. Hello, Mike.
Hi there.
So, Man Tai, can you start off telling us a little bit about your story? Where did you grow up? What was your family's attitude to work and money and earning?
Yeah, sure. So I was born in Liverpool, so I'm a local Scouser. Currently live in Manchester, and I grew up in childhood in a chip shop. My family was poor when they came across, started a business. I'm one of 8 children in the family.
Wow.
I'm number 7 in the lineup, so I'm the 7th youngest. And we're all named after mountains, the boys in China. So our Man Tai is actually the biggest mountain. There's a mountain range as well.
Have you actually been there to see your mountain then?
Yes, I have. Yes, only once, and we're going again next year. My sisters are all named after washing implements, which is strangely enough. The grandparents.
I thought you were going to say lakes or something.
No,
that married up with mountains.
It's a strange one. It should be interesting going back. If you know the water margin, have you ever heard of Monkey?
Yes.
Pigsy?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my mountain, Man Tai, is where Pigsy and Monkey live.
Excellent.
So there's an annual
what a claim to
pilgrimage.
fame.
Yeah. So I grew up in a chip shop. It's quite hard work. To be honest, I think it's helped me in my life. It's taught me never to take anything for granted. Being Chinese in the 1970s, growing up as a child, also you met up with lots of racism in school and teasing and bullying and stuff. So our family kept together really. My father was very, very diligent financially, managing the business, and I sort of ended up in the cooking side of the business. So I helped my mum in the shops doing the cooking. So I'm quite an accomplished cook as well.
What sort of age was that when you started helping out?
Oh, it was very early, about 3-4 years old. We used to get chores. I used to get woken up at midnight while at school. We used to get woken up at midnight to clean the shop because the shop closed at midnight and then shut down at 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock. So we used to get up in the morning, about midnight, clean the store, clean the shop, clean the kitchen, then go back to bed, then go to school again. So it's different. I mean, we didn't know anything different. So quite surprised to hear when we went to school how other kids didn't do any of that sort of stuff. But we never took anything for granted. And I think that's really filtered into my professional life as well. Not taking things for granted, always questioning why, what, how.
One of the things that came up recently, we had some podcasts where we interviewed self-employed people. And one of the things that came up, I think, either in the podcast or the conversation in our group afterwards, was that the self-employed people tended to realize quite early on that no one was looking after them, and that it was up to them to kind of manage their own wealth and their own finances and that kind of thing. And I guess you were kind of exposed to that quite early on as well.
Yes, through my parents. Yes, they were managed. It was a difference as well in Chinese culture. The father is the head figure, so there's no questioning him. It was a tough childhood. You know, we had there was physical abuse in the family as well. So in most Chinese cultures, that sort of happens. But in terms of looking after physical wealth, I mean, I helped my father do the finances, counting the money up and doing the books and stuff. But I didn't go down that self-employed route when I went into working.
But you were exposed very early on to the inner workings of a business and
yes,
and that kind of cash flow and all those kind of things.
Yeah.
Likening this to my own experience, I also grew up living above the shop. And so that parents of self-employed, when your parents are self-employed, I think that rubs off in a way in your attention to money, and I think you do soak up something from that says, right, you need to work to earn. It's not you're not in an environment where there's a salary appearing in anybody's bank account at the end of the month.
Yes, that's right. We never really got any money of our own. And Chinese culture is all about the family, so we all help each other. For example, when I grew up, I used to sleep in the storeroom. So we're quite very poor. We just had to manage day by day, really, and be very, very nice to the punters in the shop as well. I'm quite short. I mean, 5'3", so I'm just about the height of the counter. So if you watch me, you can just see a little head bobbing around and on top. But it was different type of childhood, I think. Quite a hard childhood. I must admit, it drove me towards wanting to get away from the family to a certain extent, which is why I deliberately made a decision to move away as far as I could in terms of work and also in terms of university, rather than actually stick around the area, which a lot of my other siblings did.
Did many of your siblings also go to university?
Yeah, most of them did.
Wow.
So a lot of them did. About 6 of us went to university. So my family had I sort of rebelled at a certain extent. I had a rebellious streak in me. My father wanted most of the kids to become doctors and lawyers because that's the main really professional view of rich people in China. But I refused. I sort of rejected that and wanted to become an engineer instead. So I became a chemical engineer in university, but my father just viewed me as a person with a mechanic, because he didn't understand what engineering was. He just thought I was a car mechanic with a spanner and stuff. So, and he kept asking me questions about cars, and I had no idea what was going on. But it was interesting. I deliberately saw it. Sort of drove me to seek other things. So before university, I sought sponsorship, which was successful. I managed to get a British Gas sponsorship, so I was sponsored through university at that time. So financially, I was actually quite well off in university.
So it sounds like you were a decent earner from quite early on, assuming your career just stayed on a regular track. Were you sort of investing and treating money as something to pile up at that point?
Yeah, it was. I think it's the attention to detail sort of rubbed off on me in the shop. So just cleaning the floors, for example, the father was very, very specific on how clean it had to be. So I think a lot of that sort of worked out into me in terms of attention to detail. So with money, always trying to, because I question a lot of things, I try to make the most of everything. And that's really when you're living in that sort of environment, you try to make the most of everything, because time is a sort of finite resource. So effectively, I looked at saving money where I could, reducing costs where I could. I didn't have investment in my head. I mean, going to university in my young years, I had no idea. I didn't invest. I only started investing when I started working, and even then I had a financial advisor from day one, basically. So
I think that's similar to my experience, that there can be years of frugality in there and actually no goal, no right, how am I going to employ this wealth that's racking up? There's no plan for building it.
Well, I'm interested in what your parents' plans were for retirement. Did they carry on working, or did they have a sort of a retirement plan in mind?
never really talked about money. Money wasn't really talked about in our family. But no, I think my parents were focused. I think my father had different because they divorced about 20 years before the end. So my mother actually had the mothering instinct of keeping everybody in the same place. And her job was to make sure that the last of our kids got through university before she considered anything else.
Wow.
So when did you hear about fire?
So it's an interesting one, actually. I only heard about fire 4 years ago.
Oh, wow.
It was never in my plans. I sort of stumbled into fire. But to be honest, I just had in my mental mind, I wanted to target to stop working around 50 when I was 50 years old. and I missed that target by 1 year. So I hit it
Wow,
at 51.
well done.
So
Where did that desire to stop at 50 come from? Was that you just felt that carrying on working was not for you, or did you not want to do? Did you see yourself trying to not do what your parents did and be kind of tied down to the shop and that kind of thing? Or
no, I know it just sounds crazy. It was just like a mental target I had. That, and also to because of the hard work, to stop the hard work.
yeah,
To try and get out of the system in a way that you can actually free your own time up and do what you want to do.
So
I mean,
probably
a lot of it was the fact that as kids in the Chinese family, you're very constrained. So maybe it's the reverse. It's like psychologically, it's interesting when I did that in the self-counselling activities later on, I learned more about myself.
So if you had only heard about fire about 4 years ago, presumably there were some years prior to that when you'd been building up some wealth, and it's only you've just changed your approach and reorganized things since learning about fire. Then you've not gone from zero to FI in 4 years, surely.
No, it was building up. I worked a career in IT. So at university, I was fairly well off. I had 3 years worth of sponsorship. In the final year, the 4th year, I got a double sponsorship. Unilever gave me one as well. And the funny thing is that when I went to my British gas manager and said, look, Unilever offered me this lump of money as well, he said, well, it's too much paperwork, keep it. So in the last final year, I had 2 lots of sponsorship. So I was fairly well off and then stepped into a management consulting job with what used to be called Arthur Anderson at that time, and now called Anderson Consulting. And that was quite a highly paid role at that time. I remember my starting salary was only 14.5K, I think, at that time. You gotta recognize this is back in 1980s. So that involved a lot of remote work. So you're working away from home, so you stay in hotels and then you're banking your money basically in terms of accommodation and stuff. It also at that time allowed you to work overtime, and they forced you to work overtime, which was paid in the time and a half. So money was building up, and I started hoarding it as I went along.
And you said that 6 of you siblings went to university. Were the others on a similar path, or were you the kind of odd one out?
I was different, I think. Apart from my little brother, I call him little. He's still quite old now. He's gone into IT as well. But I think that doctors and nurses and lawyers have different types of jobs. I think they're more vocational, except that they have huge pensions. Both my brother and sisters both have quite well-off pensions because of being doctors and GPs.
I think one of the things that we've come across is there are a lot of people in fire who have either worked in IT or worked in industries sort of adjacent to IT. And there seems to be something about IT that gives you a bit more headspace to see your finances objectively. Whereas I think a lot of vocational jobs, like doctors and lawyers and things, they tend to have their head down and make it difficult to see the sort of financial wood for the trees until quite often it's very late. Do you recognize that?
I think you're right, actually. I think my role was very much fiddling with things. I stepped into strategic innovation type roles, so I was always tinkering with lots of different things, technology, business processes, innovating where I could. And with finance, I had exactly the same approach. So I looked at the way I approached work in strategic work is to actually understand the underlying system which runs it, because that's more powerful to understand, and then try to manipulate this, or not manipulate, to leverage the most out of that system. And that sort of helped me build a lot more wealth faster. I think with IT, the job roles I had were head office roles, so they weren't revenue generating roles, so they weren't operational roles. They tend to be innovating roles. And because I wasn't revenue generating, I was always close to becoming made redundant. Because in operational roles you're more safe. And I was made redundant 3 times in my career. So each time I went through that process, obviously there was a injection of cash on the way out because I was working at a senior level. I think also with the pressure of IT, I think because it's a high pressure job, I think there's a desire to try to get out of that job as
Interesting. Yeah,
quicker
I mean,
than normal people in vocational roles.
my career was similar in that I went into IT consulting, and both on the operational and project side. But I think it's a very good point that I was sacked every 6 months. So as a contractor, you kind of have to go through that, but you get used to it. But also at the start of the career, like you, I was on consulting projects where I was sent away from home. And if you're living for 6 months in a different country, you've got quite a lot of time to think about your home country and to think about your expense account and how to sort of maximize that. And you've got the headspace a bit because living away from home gives you a bit more distance mentally as well to sort of think about stuff and start planning stuff.
I completely agree. I think being thrust into an environment where you have to survive yourself gives you a lot more confidence in managing your own, and it focuses your mind on needing to manage the actual finances as well as other things.
Did that perspective feed into your investing? I mean, were you an active investor, or have you always just been an indexer?
No, I relied on my financial advisor till about 10 years ago, 11 years ago. And he invested me into all sorts of funny things, different funds. I was on the co-funds platform. They moved me around. I was quite innovative in trying to manage my finances in terms of structuring mortgages and stuff, and went into offset mortgages, which I really leveraged quite heavily to make my mortgage go away after 17 years early, which is quite a positive thing for me. But in terms of choosing funds to go to, no, I completely trusted my financial advisor. But the reason why I sort of stopped and terminated my financial advisor is that when I hit 51, I did a review of the finances because that was the last time I was made redundant. And then I realized I was well above what I needed. I'd stumbled into fire in terms of finance. I realized I didn't need to work anymore. But then I did the numbers and I said, really, actually, I could have done this about 2 years ago.
Excellent.
So the financial advisors said, well, I said to him, you shouldn't have even told me I didn't need to carry on working. He said, well, not really, because he didn't really have the eye on the ball.
That's quite a familiar story, actually, because what we quite often hear from people is they've got the right habits in place and they've got the financial hygiene and the financial common sense, and they're happily beavering away. And then something happens at a certain point as a trigger, which then forces them to take a kind of objective view of the whole of their finances. And then quite often they say, actually, I'm not far off retirement now. I think in your case, it's interesting because you set the target yourself. You had this number of 50, and when you got there, you thought, right, well, I've said I'm going to retire at 50. I'm going to have a look at it now, and okay, well, I can retire at 51. And I think for a lot of people, it's quite often something quite traumatic, like a divorce or something like that, or otherwise it could be something like an inheritance, like a sort of good bundle of, but something has to sort of be a seed usually for people to actually look at their finances and say, I'm not far off, or I better pull my finger out and start saving.
Yeah.
In a way, it's really positive that you didn't spot it until you were a couple of years over the line, because then that takes away any temptation for one more year syndrome. It's quite an emphatic, right, I'm FI, I can hit the button now.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm still, to be honest, I've overcooked it, and it's quite simple. And once I've learned more about the FIRE principles of where money should go, and then I looked at where my money was, everything's pretty well overcooked. And I haven't even started accessing funds yet.
I think
I've been running off cash reserves.
I think that's quite common as well.
Yeah, it annoys me a bit actually, because it now has a different problem. I think the other advantage is, I mean, this is a different situation, is that my wife and I decided not to have kids, so we didn't have the financial drain of that neither. So that accelerated everything, I think.
Yeah, same here. Yeah, well, I've always known I didn't want kids, didn't want that responsibility. Always thought it was a massive responsibility that was too much for me.
I just didn't want to share my toys.
Well, inadvertently, it's a good financial decision, as you say.
Having had started a family, I don't think it makes all that much difference, but it depends a lot on your circumstances, is what I'd say.
Yeah.
So having retired, you've then just for kicks you learnt about how to be a counsellor.
Well, I stumbled into that as well. So when I retired, obviously you lose a lot of the first thing you have to try to go through was a process of change.
Yeah.
I woke up and I never got the emails anymore. So every single time you get up, you normally check your emails, you check your messages on your phone. Because I was running global teams, I had all sorts of things coming in, and then suddenly all that stopped, and all the social interaction as well stopped. So I started trying to look for other things to do. So I think the first thing I did was to do a pottery session in the evening with my wife, and then I started learning sign language, which is really interesting. So I've got into that quite heavily now. I'm now level 3 qualified signer. And I now support a lot of the deaf community as well, which opened up a whole new community inside our hearing community, which I wasn't aware of, which is very good. And then I went back to college. Yeah, I went back to college for the first level 2, I think, evening course on counselling. And then it just snowballed from there. I carried on for another 4 years.
So I think we've spoken to other people who've retired, and there's a sort of period of decompression, as I call it, where you're kind of a bit like at the end of a scuba dive, you're kind of coming up to the surface, and the closer you get to the surface, the more difference there is between working life and sort of life in retirement. But it sounds like in your case, you had quite a heavy decompression session because you were under quite a lot of pressure at work, even if you weren't necessarily aware of it, but you had a lot of responsibilities and a lot of stuff going on. So when that finished, that was quite a big change.
Yeah, it was a big change for me. And it was expected as well. Redundancy isn't the nicest process to go through. But my final redundancy was done very well because I reported to the CEO at that point. Then it was done quite nicely. But the decompression process, you're right. I mean, there's a lot of activity, and then you pretty much slow down, put the brakes on, and you're straight down to like 5 miles an hour in terms of that. You get a sort of a slow dip as well because you've got a lot of colleagues at work, but slowly over time, that starts reducing as well.
Did you get a chance to, I don't know, move down to 4 days a week, 3 days a week? Did you start a kind of a managed transition to your successor and that kind of thing, or was it sounded a bit more sudden?
It was quite sudden because I'm in a non-revenue generating role. They make those sort of business decisions, and I understand exactly why. Yeah, and it's those sort of roles which are marketing roles, strategic marketing roles, head office roles. They tend to be the ones which tend to have a cliff edge type approach.
I'm fascinated by what we can learn from the counselling side of it that's applicable to the fire community. This idea of the psychology of retirement. So it's akin to grief, is it? It's a
It is actually.
process.
I have had some clients come to me with different presenting issues. They talk about anxiety. They talk about feeling lost all the time, don't know what to do with themselves. And when we talk about that, we realize that they've recently been made redundant or they've recently retired. And it is very much a loss process. In fact, it's a loss process where they realize there's been a cost that they've been paying in their life while working, but then suddenly they stop working. If they're made redundant, for example, a lot of people feel their identity's just been swiped off them and taken away from them, and there's no trust or loyalty. And I always keep saying to them, loyalty is a cognitive process which needs 2 conscious beings to make that sort of connection. And businesses are not conscious beings, so it's just business.
I can see it being quite traumatic for people who haven't chosen their retirement date and who are made redundant, even if they're financially ready. Having somebody else make the decision for you gives you less agency and makes it more traumatic. But I'm sort of surprised that the people who had chosen their retirement date and had chosen to retire would still find it traumatic.
Well, it's not about traumatic for those people. I think they've gone through the decompression stage, as you say, to get out of the system. So maybe go traveling for a few months, that sort of thing. It's when they come out of that process where they feel that they don't know what to do, and they've still lost they've lost their identity because a lot of it was built inside work, and they feel a bit lost in terms of what to do.
I guess.
And actually, some of them who come to me are deliberately come for therapy just to learn more about themselves. So interesting enough, and this is interesting about when people retire, the best investment of money, and therapy isn't cheap. The best investment of money is really in yourself. And I think some of the clients who've come to me have actually wanting to actually learn more about themselves in a therapeutic environment.
I think it's very, very interesting. I think we've sort of talked about this, or the fringes of it, in our Facebook group, and people have kind of hinted at the fact that retirement for a lot of people is a journey of discovery where they get to know themselves. And I think on the flip side of that, I think a lot of people, well, maybe not a lot of people, but myself included, have been trying to retire since we were about 35, and I've been kind of itching to get on with it, and I've had plenty of plans of what to do when I get there. And without being too judgmental, I'm surprised by how many people seem to get there and not have done any planning for it.
Well, I'm one of those people who've got there and stumbled into it and not had any plans for it. I think the only plan I had was I can now focus on what matters. I know it's a very broad cliche, but you can really sit down and start thinking about what really matters in your life.
So you've got some agency coming, but you haven't taken it any further than that.
No, but that's me.
I wonder does the stress and the treadmill of being at work give you a structure in your life that takes those decisions away from people, and then suddenly the decisions are all theirs? And also, does that stress of work, does it mask people's other problems, and suddenly once that's taken away, do they have time to look around and realize, oh, I'm carrying all this emotional baggage and I've got these problems to deal with, and they come to the fore?
Yeah, they do. I mean, there's a lot of dysfunctional behavior is carried through from lots of activity, things you've learned and internalized in your life. I think, for example, I mean, there's a couple of stages in life where you are learning yourself in a professional job, being a follower and told what to do. And then there's also the mental shift from being a follower to a leader. So you become a manager. To switch to a management role, you have to start organizing and other people and taking accountability of what you're actually doing. So you're no longer following, you're now doing. And I think there's the next shift really is where you move into retirement. So you move away from that structure, and then you're now managing yourself. And I think there are those three stages which people go through, which have people just aren't trained for or aren't prepared for, and you have to stumble into it.
I would imagine that the being a manager phase is a bit like being a parent as well. It's suddenly the responsibilities on you for other people.
Yeah.
So I wonder, are parents a little bit prepared for the management role when it comes?
No, I think management is about managing process. I think the role you're talking about is moving from manager to a director. So when you're a director of a job, director of a company, you're now managing the welfare of the company, and you have a role to actually make money or reduce costs, to actually do what's right for the company. So that's where you get more parenting role. So there's
Okay.
the follower to a manager, the manager to a director, and then eventually you're out at the end of that saying, well, I've got to do all this to myself.
So is it a steeper change for the director to hit retirement than the manager or the worker?
I think it's just, no, it's not steeper. I think it's easier for a director to move
Okay.
into retirement. I think it's harder for a follower, if you're in a follower role or in a manager role, to move into
Because
retirement.
you've already gone through that phase of learning decision making for yourself.
Yes, because you're doing it for the company in its own right.
We often talk in the group about activities that can help that transition before you finish work. So in my case, working from home is quite a big one. If you can work from home, you're already one step removed from the office, and you can start to organize your life more on your own terms. Although obviously you've still got the kind of meetings and stuff. I moved out of London into a much more laid back part of the country, where I met a lot of other people who were on their way out of work, which helped a lot. And obviously moving to sort of 4-day week, 3-day week, or we've talked to a few people who've deliberately downgraded their role. So they've gone up the tree from follower to manager, maybe even to director, and then deliberately gone back down again for the last part of their career, down to a manager or even a kind of hired gun contractor role for the last few years. And I think putting all those things together can give you a much easier path out of work into retirement. And I wondered whether you'd seen that with any of your clients, or are your clients at the
I have
the
seen
sharp end?
I've seen people who have moved from director back down to manager roles, and then also from managers back to a doing role, but they have a different mindset, in that they've traversed up to the director role or the manager role, and they're now going the other way. And they're approaching the lesser qualified job with a different mindset, knowing that they can do it, and it's now easier.
Yes,
It's
that was
to a certain extent what I'm doing in retirement. I mean, I've looked for roles. I mean, I don't need the money, so it's more about the life. I'll tell you about the life force soon, but in terms of what I've been doing, I've been looking for roles which don't require brain power. So I've been doing food festival litter picking, which is don't need much brain power for that, but actually you do a lot of social work. You talk to a lot of the punters and talk to them separately. So it's just literally just connection you're looking for, and you're just needing, the role is just enabler to make that happen.
So what's the life force that you just mentioned?
So some of the clients I have, there's two things which I found which have helped clients who have come to me. The ones who have been forced into retirement, they go through a loss process. And there's a process which I go through them well, and it's like a grieving process. But the ones which have come to me where they feel that they've decompressed and they're not entirely sure what's going on and what to do with themselves, there's this thing called a life force. There's a guy called Phil Stutz. You can look him up in Netflix. He's got a video there. It's Phil Stutz, Stutz. He talks about a process called life force, which is a 3-layer pyramid, and it's something that you can focus on when you feel lost. And it's very, very simple. That the bottom layer is really about your body, your physical body. It's more about your primal relationship with yourself. The second layer is about people, and the third layer is self.
It sounds a bit like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but kind of on a more personal level.
Yeah, it's very much on a personal level. So in the body, for example, you can just focus on things like sleep hygiene. Are you sleeping well? Do you have sufficient nutrition in your body? Are you moving? Have you got exercise? That's something people can focus on. So if they're feeling lost, they say, well, just focus on the body, and that will actually start connecting yourself to your physical being. And then when you look at the people side, you're looking at connectedness. So there you're asking questions of, can you meet people? Can you find ways of meeting people and actually just talking to people and engaging in different communities? And then at the top of the pyramid is the self, and that's more about understanding your own internal world, knowing what's happened to you. You can easily do things like journaling stuff, understanding what's actually happened to you in your life, and just focusing on those three factors in your life, building some sort of routine around it, will actually let you psychologically move forward rather than actually feeling lost. And things will happen along the way. I mean, you'll meet different communities and you'll find you have different things. The reason why we're focusing on these things is you're starting to focus on your personal self. You've actually been bent to, a lot of people are bent out of shape by the time they retire because of work. They're being forced into doing things, or they are doing things in a certain way because they've internalized processes within their mind, which they continue to do. I mean, one of the things which we are taught psychologically in our courses is something called conditions of worth. Are you familiar with conditions of worth?
Nope.
No. So conditions of worth are internalized internalized rules which you've made in your life, and they do manifest themselves in different ways. It can cause you to have different types of behavior. I'll just find out. Just something there.
We'll put a link in the description to Phil Sturt's, but I'm interested by all this. Do you not find that there's I can imagine a very British reluctance to go into this stuff because it sounds a bit self-indulgent?
I think
I would imagine the people that you see are the ones that have got beyond that and aren't hung up about seeing a therapist or anything.
Yeah, typically people who come to who seek therapy or refer for therapy have a presenting issue,
right?
Which says the problem they don't understand.
Mike, maybe we could get you done.
It's interesting because what you said is that you've been trying to do this for a few times, and what is lacking is the fact that you're not giving yourself permission to retire in the way you want to retire, and you're hanging on to something. So there may be, for example, these conditions of worth are rules which are internalized, and the rules have been developed because you've learned that if you do these rules, you'll feel loved, they'll have worth, and you'll feel accepted. So as a child, for example, if you fall over and you cut your knee, you start crying, your parent comes up and says, "Oh no, don't cry, strong boys don't cry." And you'll learn the fact that you'll get approval from your parents or your father if you don't cry. So you try not to cry. But the fact you've internalized that rule as a child, dysfunctionally and later in life, you have difficulty in showing emotion potentially when something hurts you. But it's something you've internalized in your mind, and that's how you must do that sort of thing.
I think one thing we've bumped into quite a lot on this podcast is that people who have chosen to retire early or follow a slightly different path and things are often the odd ones out. And one question I always ask is, what do your friends and family think of your fire plans? And the quite common answer is they all think I'm mad, or they all think I'm crazy, or they all think I'm doing something extraordinary. And I think maybe that comes back to your point that a lot of people have very set rules internally about what they're allowed to do, and the fire movement is rebellious in that it's saying you don't have to follow those rules of society and work until you're 68.
I agree. I do agree with that. And I think also when you get to fire, it's an opportunity to really dismantle some of the internal rules which are guiding you within the fire process. So when you reach fire, you don't suddenly release these rules because you're not aware of them. You're not psychologically aware of them. They're in your subconscious. Therapy, I think, and this is why I deliberately went. I mean, to be honest, I went and did the counselling course because I wanted to invest money in myself and to learn more about myself. And it wasn't to become a counsellor. A lot of the other people in the course were to be a counsellor. Yeah. But I thought if I'm going to pay for therapy anyway, I might as well go to a course which costs the same and learn all the theory. Yeah. And that's what I did. And that was my motivation for going to do the study in counselling, is to actually, because you go through a process of therapy as well, self-therapy within the course in level 3 and level 4.
One
Learn more
thing,
about yourself.
one thing I've going back to, and this does actually link up, going back to my point about things you can do to prepare yourself for retirement or to prepare yourself from fire. One of the things that comes up in the group, which I thoroughly recommend, is people doing trial retirements or trial fires or sabbaticals, and there's a whole vocabulary of words for not doing work, but doing it within the framework of the sort of normal career. And what I say to people is, if you can give yourself the headspace to have 3 months off work and take a proper good look at your finances and everything else, quite often, even if people have got 2 or 3 more years to work, they'll decide, actually, hang on a minute, now that I can see it all clearly, I can probably retire in, at the end of this 3 months or even now. And I'm never quite sure whether that's because they've looked at their finances and didn't realize all along that they're actually much closer to than they were, or whether they've just slightly moved the goalposts and the freedom has given them a chance, as you would say, to hang up some of their hang-ups and reprogram themselves to think, well, actually, I'd much rather just stop work now and live on slightly less.
I think, yeah, and for some people it's like that. I think a lot of people don't actually use financial money to make decisions. There are other decisions which still drive them to work.
Yeah, I mean, I think a
It's
big one, as I'd put it to people, is that for a lot of your fire period, you're trying to get enough money to support a lifestyle which you've kind of created as a kind of model. And if you can get the headspace to get outside that, you can say, well, hang on a minute, let's take the lifestyle model and adjust that to fit the money I've got.
sort of, I think that's a bit rigid, personally. I mean, looking at it, I think fire is more about having the freedom to realign what you do to what you really want to do.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's the adage of, if your work is something you really love doing, don't actually feel like you're working.
Yeah, there's the whole flow thing.
So it's that fire enables that to happen if you want to do it. It's exactly what happens in fire anyway, because when you become fire, you have the freedom to choose what you want to do, whether to give back to others, whether to help others, whether you actually need to spend more time with other people, whether to learn new skills. It's sort of things which you have the ability and the freedom to, without the work constraints of needing to work to get the money, because therefore you have to compromise yourself in terms of what you actually have to do. You have the freedom to do what you want to do and spend the money doing it. It's like when you're working, you're trading your time and your health and what you want to do for money. That's what you get. But when you're in fire mode, it's the reverse. You're trading, you're spending the money to actually buy what you want to do, the time and the effort, and what you actually want to actually do. So it's actually realigning more to what your true self is about. And this is the bit I was missing. A lot of people are missing this. What is my true self? Because I've been bent out of shape for so long and compromising in work for so long, that really isn't me. All I know is that it's not me, but I don't know what me is.
You've got me thinking about how this relates to me, who's doing coast fire and doing bits and bobs of work in amongst ultimately not having the day job, not having the commute each morning. And I wonder, am I confusing myself, or am I training myself to flip between these modes quite seamlessly?
Depends what you're doing. Do you enjoy the work you're doing, and do you have the ability to choose?
Well, I'm taking on things that come along. Like I've been doing some work for the past couple of weeks with a pal, and I'm taking it on the basis that it looks fun, but then the reality is a mixture of fun and oh yeah, there's a reason I didn't want to be at work in the first place. So I am putting myself back in that. Oh, I'm stuck in traffic and things that I don't like about work. It's interesting. Am I confusing myself?
Maybe.
Hmm.
I think, yeah.
I think, Andy, from our conversations, we've discussed the fact that we've never taken work particularly seriously, and seen it more as a means to an end rather than having our head down and being completely swallowed. And I think when you've got that end in mind, it's much easier to get to fire and to retire and things. But if you don't have that end in mind and work is a continual process of surviving and just about having enough left at the end of the month, it's very different.
I'd agree, actually, Mike. I think very much I had the mind that work was an enabler. It's a means to an end, but there's a cost to you to go down that journey because you made a decision. You'll be losing things. So, for example, if you work 60 hours a week or 70 hours a week, knowing that you're going to be earning more than you, and therefore move further ahead in your fire journey, there's a cost to doing that. There's
There's
loss.
also the 60 hours a week thing makes me laugh because I mean I worked in the city for a while as well, where there's a kind of a sort of pissing contest of who works the most hours and who comes in the most at weekends and stuff. And you can see it particularly in contractors where they get to a point where they say, sorry, it's 5 o'clock, I'm going home now. I don't care what's going on. I don't care if the project's urgent, because there'll be another crisis tomorrow. There'll be a guaranteed crisis every day. I'm going home at 5 o'clock. I'll be here first thing in the morning.
Yeah, I agree with that. There are some other people who, for example, go into work first, get in early because they have this condition that their bosses will approve of them. So you're doing things
Yes.
which gain approval. So I must, for example, wherever you have a word, if you could sit down and just write down the sort of rules which rules your life. So what things do I must do? You can turn out with things like I must be quiet and do what I'm told, and that's really renovating from something which has happened in your childhood, which is internalize that rule that you have to do that. Or I must be perfect at everything to gain approval from everybody. So I need to arrive work early, for example, so people will think I'm really hardworking, or I need to be seen as the last person to be leaving.
Really interesting. Yeah.
There's been some fascinating stuff in this, and I'm sure people are going to get some insights from it. We're running out of time. Is there anything else, Man Tai, that you would say we've not covered that you wanted to talk about with regards to the counselling or anything?
There's quite a lot in counselling. That there are things, for example, like there are some people who are very rich and come therapy. They fired very, very early. But they just have difficulty in getting on with people, and they don't understand why. And there are certain, although we talk about trying to get out of work quickly, work also has a role in terms of challenging your cognition processes in an environment where you have to accept other people. You're forced into an environment to accept other people's opinions, even though you don't approve yourself. Actually builds your own resilience, has a role, builds a resilience in your mind. And what's something, it's something like the social reality testing your ideas, where people feel differently. It helps calibrate your brain over time. So there are on the flip side, if you fire far too early, you sort of isolated from that activity, which you do actually see in work.
But I think you can replace a lot of those functions in retirement with other things like volunteering, non-execs, other things to give you those challenges to replace the
Depends.
mental effort or the mental sort of gym that you're missing from work. I think
No, it's not the mental stimulation I'm talking about. It's more the the ability to actually be forced into a situation where you have to actually deal with it. So, for example, if you're doing volunteering, you're actually doing something which you want to do, and you know you can walk away. Whereas if you're in work, then you have to work with that situation and actually find a resolution.
Yeah, I think a lot of people tend to take on roles like non-exec directs, for example, where you have to agree with people and actually get things done. And I think that's probably a slightly more difficult role, but that gives you back some of those challenges.
You don't tend to find many people who have fired very, very early as non-execs.
No.
Directors, they tend to be people who've actually been directors themselves, who've got up that tree, corporate role, and got to that level before they get the experience.
But Mike and I get this because we get all the challenge we need by running the fireplace together, so that we've got all that conflict and compromise.
You do. I mean, this is only social media. It's a massive topic in psychology.
I like to think of it as the good side of social media.
Well, social media is just one side of the coin. It's only the side which they see. So, for example, if you post your picture on social media, you'll take 50 pictures and pick one, but you don't publish the other 49. So it's not reality as such. It's actually what you want to present to the world and how you want to be seen in the world.
And I think we're all meeting up next week, aren't we, Andy?
Oh, I think we are actually.
I hope so. Is this the Northwich?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, are you coming up to that, Mike?
I will be coming up to that. Yes.
Oh wow, we're honoured.
Yeah.
I think John's popping in as well. I think.
Yeah. I think there's quite a lot of names hoping to be there.
Andy came down to Dorchester last week, so I think it's my turn to come up to Northwich.
Fair enough. Well, I think we're out of time. Let's do the housekeeping. At the start, I forgot to do our disclaimer, saying that we're amateur investors and this content's intended to be us learning together rather than regulated financial advice. But I think for this episode, there's not been any financial advice. It's all been learning together. That's been fabulous. We urge you to check ideas you've heard here with other sources. Don't trust us for anything. We've got a website, thefireplace.info. That's filled with articles and more content. Thanks for listening. Man Tai, thanks for being on. This has been very interesting. I'm sure that lots of people are going to be buttonholing you and getting further insights from you. And I for one, feel that we could go deeper into this and come up with some more content about mindset of retirement and try how to get your mental hygiene a bit better with all this.
Thank you. Thank you for the podcast. Inviting me.
Super. Thanks, guys, and see you next time.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.